Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2, right, of our podcast, Mike. I feel so official with the podcast thing on. I got the headphones on. I wish you could see us and the big microphone. I feel like I'm right here live in the lobby. But welcome everybody to episode 2. We're just wanting to do a little bit more, go a little bit further. I think we've entitled the podcast Beyond the Message. And that's exactly what it is. Hopefully you get a chance to just kind of pay attention to what we talk about today, to try to bring this to a applicable moment. Last week's message was tough. I mean, it was from Luke chapter 14. Jesus kind of turns to that crowd and asks, or really tells them, this is the cost of discipleship. So, Pastor Mike, I'll be interested to hear your conversation or your thought on this during this conversation about what people would think, because, you know, it's a hard message to preach. I kind of said it, which is weird, I guess, this time of year. You know, we're right here at the beginning of summer. But the idea of a series that we started called Lake Life, what it means to be a disciple, living authentic, kingdom-effective lives, something that's really, really convicted me. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to do something a little different. If you're listening, let's just see if we can entice somebody. This week I'm talking about enticement, but if you got something out of the message and you're like, man, Brent, that spoke to me this particular way, do me a favor, email me, Brent, B-R-E-N-T, @pathwayschurch.com. And just, I'm going to, for a few people, I don't know exactly how many, I'm going to do some giveaways. If you email me, you might be getting something out of this in return, just to see, first off, if you're listening and how that message is speaking to you. I really want the sermon to go beyond the moment, and I guess that's why we're doing this. So, Pastor Mike, initially, I really just kind of up front to try to get the crowd engaged, get us all thinking, the idea of hating hidden cost. And I love it. And I said it, I think most services, that one of the legit things about Christianity is Jesus didn't just, hey, come follow me for some narcissistic reason. He said, count the cost. He's up front with the cost. What was your take on that?
I loved how you took Jesus's words and put that in a way that people really relate to today, because jumping on an Allegiant flight or whatever, by the time you are done, you get through that checkout process, it's like your final fee is 3 times of what you thought it was going in. I think that's what trips a lot of Christians up. They came to God maybe for the wrong reasons. They came in thinking that life was going to be simple and easy, and then when they realized that this requires sacrifice, and this is not always easy, and life isn't always sunshine and roses just because I give my life to God. Something unexpected happens, and they're like, I don't get it. I thought if I gave my life to Christ that things were going to be better, that life was going to be good, and life was better before I made this decision. But suddenly this week or whatever it was, life blew up in my face, and that's very discouraging to that individual. But they don't necessarily realize in that moment that this is bigger than just, you know, the things that we all get hung up on. It's got to go beyond that, and the blessings are definitely far beyond that.
Yeah, you know, I kind of have made this statement the last 2 weeks, and I'll keep making it. I don't want to be a pastor guilty of packing the stadium with fans.
Right.
You know, I think people go, well, why do you want me to come to church? I don't want you to come to church just to sit here. I want you to come to church to follow Christ. It's the greatest decision you'll ever make in your life. Right. It's worth it. And I think I only alluded to it one service, but the idea of StubHub and Allegiant, they're following a format called drip pricing. You know, they just drip it on you. And I think churches can be guilty of that, where, okay, come to Christ, it's great, give to the church, and then God's going to give to you, and all of these things that we try to, you know, entice people, that's what they think. And so after a while, they're like, wait a minute, I mean, is this worth the cost? I mean, I'm giving my life to Christ. And I love it that Christ would teach us and model, hey, come to me, it's the greatest decision you'll ever make. It's when the chips are down, it's worth it. Everything in life, your eternity is worth it. But the cost is profound. Somebody wrote, and I didn't really use it, it's a journey marked by surrender, sacrifice, and a willingness to lay down everything for the sake of following Jesus. That's what being a Christian is about. And I just want to make sure that I'm up front like Christ was up front. Hey, listen, when we come to Christ, it's no longer us who lives, as the Apostle Paul would say, and I mentioned that. It's Christ who lives in us. That is everything. And that, to me, is a marking of follower of Christ. The word Christian, We've talked about that. I think we've beat that up for years. Is kind of what kind of word is that anymore?
Yeah.
Everybody seems to be a Christian, but I think they're admirers of Jesus. They believe in Jesus. Well, the demons believed in Jesus, but do we follow Christ? Is it worth it? And it is worth it. And so we're just going to keep kind of bringing that to life each and every week. In a few weeks you'll preach, and we'll talk about the idea of followers fish, and the idea of Christians were called to make waves. This week for Father's Day is the idea of sin, in our lives. Can we follow Christ with the knowing sin in our lives? It's one thing to ask for forgiveness of sin. I don't want to preach the message this week, but that's next week. But it's another thing to forsake it and say, I want to follow Christ. And so that's what I was trying to do up front. I was just trying to bring about, hey, we hate it with hidden cost. We can't stand it. That's just our world. They drip it on us. And after a while, we're like, what did I just do? I thought it was this, and it's that. Being a Christian is, hey, we give our lives to Christ. And so I love the idea that Jesus is up front. Luke 14, verses 25 through 35, you can go back and read it. Jesus just gives us pictures. And that's kind of what I want to talk about, because I think that's the relatable part, it's the convictional part for me, these pictures of Christ. He gets very specific on, this is kind of the cost of discipleship. When you think of all these things in your life, and it started with family, you got to hate mother, father, brother, sister, even yourself, and people get weirded out by that. It's like, what are you talking about? Because we're taught in our society, I love me, and then everything else is kind of whatever. But Christ is like, listen, the idea of having a relationship with Jesus has got to be so passionate. Everything else is kind of hatred by comparison. And I use that analogy. I'd like to know your take on that, because I said, hey, ladies, I love you. But compared to my love for my wife, I hate you. And you could almost feel, what are you talking? That was a horrible, but I think they got it. It was like a light bulb moment of, okay, I understand that. And especially when I rolled into a parent and a child, our love for our children just is way more than any. We love other kids, and we love them to be a part of team sports, but we want our kid to succeed the most. That love is so passionate. What'd you think about that?
I thought that was a great way to put it. And, and depending on the translation you look at this passage, because I was following along New Living, and it says specifically, verse 26, if you want to be my disciple, you must, by comparison, hate everyone else. And it goes into that list. And I thought just that makes the point. And like you said, it's hyperbole. There's a little bit of exaggeration in what he's saying in order to express the seriousness of the moment. He's emphasizing the point that, hey, this is not something that you should look at flippantly. You're not signing up for, team sports for the summer. This has got to go beyond this. This is you're all in or you're not. I can definitely relate in the idea of the marriage idea and all that with my wife. That relationship has to come first and foremost. If you put other people on the equal footing that you would in that relationship, obviously you've got serious priority issues and all that. And so Jesus is emphasizing the point. This has got to be the number one relationship in your life. We talk about it all the time, that Christianity, it's not rituals and traditions, even though there is certain spiritual aspects and routines and stuff that we get into, but it's not that. It's first and foremost a relationship. And so that relationship with Christ has got to be that number one in our lives. So if that means that, hey, we have to sometimes do the hard thing and we have to sever relationships with people that we might truly care about because we know that it leads us to the wrong roads, or because that gets us into sinful circumstances or temptations or whatever, in order to maintain a relationship with Christ, and that's what we have to do. And so I thought that was a great analogy. And then, of course, when you said that about, flipping it to your kids and everything else, I can think of that because, I watch Micah in his karate class every week, and I'm like, okay, that's great. Your kid did this, your kid did that, but I want my kid to show your kid up. I mean, we all understand that.
A certain line of thinking that I didn't really preach, and I thought about it, and it's interesting, this conversation. You almost feel like Christ is trying to separate the committed versus the curious.
Yeah.
Because, Matthew 10:22, and I kind of alluded to that, he knew that one day these people are going to be persecuted. Are they going to take a stand or not? Are they going to fall away? And if they start to fall away, what a detriment to the cause of Christ and everything that matters in people's lives. Matthew 10:22, I didn't use it. All men, Jesus said, will hate you because of me. Mm-hmm. But he who stands firm to the end will be saved. Mm-hmm. And the idea of Christ is looking at them like, listen, a lot of you are curious. Everybody was being attracted to Christ. He was teaching and preaching and healing. And it was the mob mentality. And we can see that in our society. And it's almost like he stops after the parable of the great banquet, before the parable of the lost sheep, how much God loves us and longs for a relationship with us and all. He's like, guys, that hyperbole, that exaggerated, maybe just, verbiage for a dramatic effect. He's like, listen, it's way more than this.
Yeah.
And I think people in our society where it's upward, everyone should win, and there's no. But we see that in our society, even sports teams, whatever, they separate the committed versus the curious.
Yeah.
Who's going to take this stand here? Even in jobs, how many people are committed to it versus they're here today and gone tomorrow? Everyone sees that, and Christ almost is like, hey, who's going to be committed here? The idea of a relationship with me is everything, but it's going to cost you everything. I didn't go down that line of thinking. I thought that was interesting, that it was almost a separator. It's like separating the fans versus the followers, the committed versus the curious. And you can almost see that in Scripture, that Christ is going to stop. And that's why I think I said it, and I believe it. And you can be agnostic if you're listening to this or whatever and go, I don't understand that costs too much. I think it's the legit thing of Christianity, that Christ is going to be upfront about the cost. He's not going to just try to entice you. Oh, you get this, you do this, this is for you. He's like, there's a cost here. Give your life to me, this relationship that matters. And this is why I'm here. That's pretty loud. Picture 2, I went into the cross.
Yeah.
I think what I said is very, very real. For me, I use that stupid little analogy that I told Javon on my back. I guess this is my cross to bear at middle age. And she kind of, it's like, listen, are you going to really use that as an analogy of the cross of Christ? And then, my granddaughter has that beautiful cross that she wears, and we look at it as it's pretty, but the horrific nature of that, the idea of people carrying their cross, that means you're totally committed. There's really no turning back. You're basically a dead person walking. Christ is going to use that. That's striking analogy, that we look at it as, okay, we think of Christ on the cross, us, his grace and mercy, but they understood this was before Christ would go to the cross. Most of them had no idea it was going to end that way.
Right.
They understood, like, whoa, this, like you just said, this is not fun and games. Mm-hmm. This is not a walk in the park. This is commitment.
Well, and verse 25 starts off, it says, a large crowd was following him, and you talked about that. Jesus was gaining all kinds of attention. I mean, he had done miracles, he'd done all these things, his teaching, so people are coming to him because they've either seen or they've heard about this man. So like you said, they're curious, they're wanting to see what's going on. I think the fact that he got as hardcore as he did in this moment was no mistake, because like you said, he's drawing that line in the sand of, hey, if you want to follow me, this is more than just what can I get out of this. This is more than what can Jesus do for you. What miracle can he perform in your life? This goes well beyond that. It's lifestyle. But then in the Life Application Study Bible, it notes on here that, as you talked about this weekend, his audience, people he was talking to, they knew exactly what picture he was painting. They had seen it more than likely firsthand when he talked about carrying your cross. It's that idea of total surrender, total humiliation before you even get to this idea of death. And I think a lot of times we kind of lose that in the sense of, we read this and we think, oh, is Jesus saying that I have to die, literally be put to death as a believer in order to be a disciple? Obviously, there are numerous martyrs. That is not something that has gone away at all in modern day. There are people that die for their faith on a regular basis. But like you talked about this weekend, for most of us, this is the idea of, listen, it's humility. It's learning to say that it's not about me, it's not about my priorities, but it's saying I'm going to be humble and I'm going to be totally surrendered to the cause of Christ, to my relationship with him, whatever that looks like. All these things that maybe before you came to Christ that you were passionate about, that you were caught up in, the things you struggled with, whatever it is, or like we talked about a minute ago, relationships, any of this stuff, we have to be willing to say that ultimately, if it comes down to it, that I'm willing to let those things die in my life, that even if I don't literally die in this life for my faith, that maybe it's the idea that things that I had been pursuing before my relationship with Christ, those things had to die. Those things had to go to the cross, so to speak, to chase after God. And I thought that was a really good point this weekend when you talked about that idea of they knew exactly what he was talking about.
Yeah.
That in the way you walk on your day-to-day routine, those things might have to die. That's the part of you that has to go to the cross and say, okay, that part of me no longer is living. It's all about him.
Yeah, one of the pictures was surrender. So this is kind of inside, people always, I don't think they always ask, but sometimes they're curious. They're like, in a message, where did you feel was like the moment of most impact? And I kind of felt like during that picture of surrender, when I talked about the lifeguard saving the drowning man.
Powerful story.
That's where you could feel, because even in a podcast, we can talk about principles and but when you tell a story that, again, the light bulb comes on, that the lifeguard waited because the man was bigger and thrashing, and he made the statement, as long as he thought he could save himself, I couldn't help him. Right. But the moment that he gave up, and it's like, I can't do this on my own, then I saved him. I think that analogy of surrender, that's what we all struggle with. It's like, we're going to save ourselves, we're going to do this, and I think Christ is like, if you think you can save yourself, you're going to lose your life. But if you lose your life for me, you'll gain it. That's a really countercultural thought. We don't think of that at all. We think of, what can I do? Basically, what is Christ doing for me, instead of me, hey, you know what? God, you've already done it. Christ saved me. He set me free. My eternity is set. And I just think ultimately, if you go in my brain and you stood on that stage and you felt the crowd, every service, that was the moment of most impact. Yeah. And it's amazing. It's just a story. I mean, it's a really good story, but I think we all can, I understand that. That is a perfect example of our relationship with Christ. Two things personally that matter the most for me in the message, and I think I'm preaching to myself for sure, is finishing well. Mm-hmm. I've been up close and personal with, now my last parent dying, especially mother, Pastor Pat, who'd been in ministry for 60 years. I've been in ministry with her 32 years every day, side by side. The impact of her finishing well, you can feel it. I can feel it not only on my family, my kids, my granddaughter, but our church and people that were connected to her. The idea of that's so inspirational. It's like, wow, that's such an impact in my life versus crashing and burning and then because I know I can do this forever. And if I do something stupid, that's going to be the lasting impact. You say, well, that's pressure. Well, it's reality, and so the idea of the last picture, I guess, is why I will close, which I think is really probably the most applicable, is the idea of Jesus about faces and say, hey, salt, what? I mean, why are we going that direction? But the idea of staying pure equals valuable. Salt was only valuable in a real way to them when it was pure. When it was mixed with everything else, it was only good to be thrown out. Almost, you got to kind of think about this, because people are like, well, that's a brutal conversation that Jesus has with a large crowd. But what is he saying? If you want to be my disciple, this is different than just the idea of fair weather fans and somebody admiring Christ and, kicking the tires. This is, hey, I want to follow Christ. I understand that this matters to me. And that idea of pure motives, doing the right things. Are we going to be perfect? Of course not. Are we going to sin? We talk about this week. Yes, we're going to be tripped up on all the debris of life. But the idea of confessing our sin and moving forward and forsaking that and saying nothing is worth it but my relationship with Christ. Pure equals valuable. What do you think about that?
Ultimately, that's the thing that you've said it a few times. It's that dividing line. We're distinguishing the curious from the committed. And so this goes back to that idea that, no, you're never going to be perfect. We're all going to struggle. We're all going to sin. We're all going to deal with things. But if you don't wake up every day, and like we've talked about before and even mentioned last week, that wedding ring analogy, that you're putting that ring on that morning and going, okay, God, it's me and you. I'm locked in. I'm starting over. And so if it's not that pursuit of that relationship with God to do your best to try to live up to godly standards, that we live a countercultural life, that we don't look like everyone else, but to say that, hey, you're a child of God is very different. And people should be able to look at us and go, they may not be perfect, but man, there is something really different about that person. There is something about them that makes them unlike most of the people that I know. When they start recognizing that in us, that should hopefully be the thing that helps pull them towards God. Like you said numerous times, I forget who the origin of the quote was, but that out of 100 people, 99 people will read the Christian, one will read the Bible.
D.L. Moody,
yeah. And I think that's exactly what we have to be mindful of.
So that's a good way to put it then. Our committed lives create curiosity in others.
Yeah.
So I guess how we'll close this, if you're driving down the road, you're sitting just listening to us, the prayer of the day is, God, I want to move beyond curious to committed. And where am I at that? And I think that's a daily, like we talked about, the rhythm. We didn't do that all week. It just kind of came to me between Wednesday and Saturday, the rhythm of that song, I have decided to follow Jesus, just the day-to-day rhythm. God, I don't want to just be curious. I want to be committed. Thank you for all that you've done for me. And that would be our prayer, listening wherever you are. Just stop and go, God, I want to move beyond, always move beyond curiosity to being committed to you. It's no longer I who live, Paul says it, but Christ who lives in me. Well, Pastor Mike, thanks, guys, for listening. Again, this is just our attempt. We're not just throwing out another podcast to throw out another podcast, but go beyond the message a little bit, to think about it a little bit more, because, man, that is my goal for the sermon, to move beyond the moment. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.